Hello and welcome to OT, the podcast. We're here to talk about watches, time, and how to spend it. My name is, of course, Felix Schultz, and with me is...
Andy Green. Felix, how you going, mate?
I'm going pretty well. Daylight
Fantastic.
savings has just hit us, and I
had no idea.
No, that's the thing with iPhones.
Yeah.
Well, you wake up and you're like, wow, I slept in.
Exactly, yeah.
And then you put the watch on the wrist, and turns out you put it all together.
It all makes sense.
Now, Andy, we've got
Yes.
a sort of the second half in a double act today.
Okay, part two.
Yeah, kind of part two. We've got Gabe Reilly from Collective. So you might remember a little while ago we spoke to Asher Rapkin, his partner in crime, when they'd released their Urwerk. This time around, it's IWC who's up for the collective treatment.
I did wonder what those videos with SJP and Jeremy Kirkland and of course Adrian Barker, last week's guest, were all about. It makes sense, Felix.
But before that, we've been up to some trouble, haven't we?
We have, Felix. We just like coming down off the high of hosting our first ever live podcast for Cartier.
Yeah, that was an experience, and not only because we got to get out of the house and do some work that wasn't from home.
Yeah, it was a full on production with crews and
lights, camera,
action, heaps and heaps of action.
Yeah.
I feel like, are we going to publish that as an actual podcast?
I believe we are.
Awesome.
I mean, we're going to look fools if we don't end up publishing it, but I'm pretty confident saying that that's going to happen. I'm not entirely sure of the timing at the moment, but we'll definitely we should put it out. We'll put up the YouTube and we'll do it as an audio as well. So it'll be a bit different. But you'll if you missed out and you were jealous from the excitement from our Instagram, don't worry, it'll be there for you at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited to share it with a broader audience. What have you been up to, though? You've been doing some stuff.
I've been doing a few things. First off, I've been watching Morning Wars Season 2 on Apple TV when I'm not watching Ted Lasso.
Yes.
And I just did notice, well, we knew this because I think you picked it up from Instagram a while ago.
Yeah.
Jennifer Aniston, the one and only, is wearing a very, very cool Chopard Alpine Eagle.
Yeah.
On the wrist, which suits her in the full gold model, and that's cool. But there's another watch I spotted after that is very in character. So Billy Crudup, I believe I say his last name right. Are you familiar with who Billy Crudup plays in the show?
Yeah.
So he's like the executive. You expect him to wear some sort of big power watch, but it's a very unusual choice. I can't make out what it is. We need to get the Instagram detectives onto it. But it looks like he's wearing something that I reckon's like 28, 32 millimeters and looks very like 90s retro. So interesting prop choice there, which I'm going to keep my eyes open for.
Yeah, I mean, I've just watched episode 1, so I'm back into it as well.
Yeah, well, let me know. Keep your eyes out on Billy's wrist.
I'll keep them peeled.
I've got something else for you, Andy.
What's that?
You ready to lose yourself?
Yes.
I saw an article that had me very excited and disappointed at the fact that we cannot travel to Detroit right now.
I think our Facebook has synced up finally.
The algorithms, they know.
The algorithms are aligned.
Eminem, he's opened up a pasta restaurant called Mum Spaghetti.
Yep.
This had to happen. It's 20 years in the making. It's a spaghetti restaurant. Apparently the menu is very simple. You can get spaghetti, you can add meatballs to it, or you can get rabbit balls, which are ironically vegan, or you can get a spaghetti sandwich. So it's incredible and it looks good. My main question is, does the staff uniform involve vomit on the sweaters already?
BYO vomit. He was serving day one. The opening day. Yeah, he was in the drive-through.
Oh, yeah. And I actually just after that, I just went back and like watched some of the rap battles out of 8 Mile and listened to that like early Eminem, which was when his more recent stuff. Maybe I've petered off, but God, he's good. He's that movie was exceptional. I don't know.
I love your love. You genuinely do love, 90s and early 2000s rap music, don't you?
I really do. It's
Yeah.
there was another
People
headline
would not pick this. Yeah, Wu-Tang
I've
Clan. You're a fan.
oh yeah, I mean, it's peak Felix. There was an article. I watched The Matrix again recently because there's a new one coming out, obviously, and so now I'm getting a lot of Matrix related content on my phone. And one of them was like, "Why the Matrix was the perfect era for new metal." I'm like, yes. I don't
Which
know if that
you
is.
just watched the first Matrix.
Yeah, I'm less enthusiastic about 2 and 3.
3, Keanu is in it for like 3 minutes.
Yeah, it got a bit silly, didn't it?
Yeah, he was. How much can I get paid for the smallest amount of work?
Oh, and again, speaking about Keanu getting paid,
Mm.
he in another example of why Keanu is one of the Hollywood's most wholesome. His wages from the most recent one, he distributed it pretty much, I think, all of his wages amongst the crew.
Oh yeah, I think he did that with 2 and 3 as well.
Yeah, like I mean, I'm sure maybe he has a deal where he gets percentage of profit and he's appearing
Yeah.
so he's not like going to be poor from it.
Yeah, the special effects team on 3 got like $1 million US or something each. Like that was their cut, which to be fair, they earned because he was not in the film.
Sure, yeah. They did
I
did
love
all the
Keanu,
hard
so
work.
why are we
in
throwing
there.
shade? Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm kind of excited about it. And the first meal, it holds up quite well. Like it's what,
Yeah.
20,
The first one is
20 years
amazing.
old, 22 years old now.
And shot in Sydney, right? The first one.
Yeah, a lot of recognizable Sydney there, and a couple of extras from neighbours at the time or popping up.
What's the main guy? The main bad guy.
Oh, it's Hugo Weaving.
Yeah. What's his character's name?
Agent Smith.
Agent Smith. That's right. Agent Smith. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, we could do impersonations, but I think the people listening to OT, the podcast, don't necessarily want us
They don't need that.
recreating the Matrix. There's probably a Matrix podcast out there for your 90s sci-fi needs.
All right, Felix. So we need to talk about something else quickly.
We do. What are we into?
This week, we are pleased to have the wonderful Nomos Glasute back as our sponsors. They've just released some funky new takes on their iconic Autobahn. So, Felix, let's get into it.
Yeah, Andy. And I think a good place to start is the Autobahn itself. This watch was released in 2018. And I'm going to be honest with you, I was very surprised by it. I did not see it coming because it's like a driving watch. It's a sporty driving watch, which isn't what I typically associate with the sleek pared back design of Nomos. But then again, it's not a sports chronograph. It's sleek, it's sophisticated. It's a take on the genre that plays with color and shape and line in quite surprising and dynamic ways. There's like heaps of bold curves and depth, and it's really, for me, it's a fascinating exercise in dial design, and that sort of automotive inspiration is there with the references to like a dash gauge. But before we talk about the new limited edition director's cut of this surprising sports design, I think we need to talk about what you've had on your wrist, Andy.
Yeah, well, so I've been just wearing the automatic Neomatic Autobahn 41 with the midnight blue dial. So the one of the regular production models, Felix. To get a bit of a feel for the Autobahn. It's a watch I have very fond memories of. As you mentioned, it came out in 2018. We were at Baselworld together. We snuck away.
Oh,
yes, we were. We snuck away.
Sneak away. I remember
to Nomos. We spent a fair bit of time in their sort of big and lovely booth back in the day.
Yeah.
And this was when the UV torch came out, and we had a lot of fun looking at this pretty unusual dial. But I really love, so after a few weeks, I really love the balance of the dial with that sort of ring of lume at the top and the sectored date wheel at 6 o'clock. The elongated shape really does flow beautifully from sort of up from that curved dial into the blue ring of Superluminova. And it is a really unique statement, that curved dial, Felix. It sort of gives off a bit of racetrack energy.
Sure.
That NASCAR coming around. Coming around the edges of the racetrack. And the large hour hand does kind of support that. It's lume filled to match that top ring. And is supported by really kind of a couple of nice discrete red touches of the tip of the seconds hand and the subdial hand. And then the sapphire crystal has a really subtle dome to it, and that I think complements the dial because it kind of curves up and then continues with that curve of the crystal, which is quite cute and really, really nicely done. On the wrist, it sits comfortably. It's a really nice watch to wear. It's got a woven textile strap, which is waterproof. super handy, but super comfortable, super soft. Really kind of a luxurious feel to it. At 41 millimeters, yeah, there's a bit of a presence there, but it is a slim case, Felix, 10.5 millimeters.
Yep.
Obviously, there's a sapphire crystal case back, and that shows off the DUW 6101 caliber that has some lovely finishing to it. What else can I tell you? Well, look, it's a rather unique looking watch, but it is super wearable. You can wear this every day. And I think it's an exciting one to see Nomos having a bit of fun with, which is, these new watches that we're about to talk about.
Yeah, we'll get to the fun in a second. I think it's also still, so the regular production version is 6,760 Australian dollars across all the versions pretty much.
Yeah.
And again, that's still, for what you get, it's quite a package. But I think speaking of packages, we need to have a look at this new Directors Cup. So we're getting 3 new limited editions, and they are, in a sort of poetic turn of phrase, a 3-way street. They're called A3, A7, and A9, and they're named for the major German freeways. And they stand out for quite a few reasons. First of all, you cannot miss the colours. There's very fresh new colourways. We'll get into those in a second. But for me, what you sort of, we got the press release for it in advance, obviously, and you just sent me a message like, dude, have you seen the bracelet?
Yes. So cool.
It's a real retro throwback bracelet that, again, is really unexpected. Maybe Autobahn is where Nomos do the unexpected. I don't know. So let's talk about them. A3 is in white, orange, and red. A7 is blue and yellow. And A9 is black and grey. And again, the sort of highlight, that semicircular disc is in luminous material, which really stands out in the dark. It's very fun and reminiscent of German cars from the 60s and 70s in sort of the colours and the tones used, which brings in the choice of that really... that I guess it's a rally style bracelet. This is a podcast, obviously, so it's that 2-piece sort of solid steel with perforated holes.
Cool.
That's attached with a Nomos deployant clasp. It's a vibe.
It's such a vibe.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that this bracelet, like in fact, the Autobahn, is designed by a designer named Werner Eislinger, and it's also available in these only. The bracelet is only available with these limited editions. And just like the one you've got on, it's powered by the Neomatic DUW 6101. This one has been adjusted to chronometer standards.
Yes.
And water resistant to 100 meters, so you can, go anywhere, do anything, all that sort of good stuff. And each colorway is limited to 175 pieces, as they were originally intended as part of last year's celebration of 175 years of watchmaking in Glashütte. Now, we didn't mention Werner Eislinger there, and he's the man behind the original design, and really sort of maybe that's where this creative vision is coming into. And it's maybe worth wondering, who is this gentleman? So,
who is he?
Well, he's a very, very famous designer, basically. He founded Studio Eislinger in 1993 in Berlin, opened up in Singapore in 2008. His chair was the first German chair since 1964 to be selected for the permanent collection of MoMA in New York. So it's kind of a big deal for your design.
Yeah, massive.
For your design guys. And his furniture is also on display in the Fons National d'Art Contemporary in Paris, Victoria and Albert in London, and the Neue Sammlung in Munich. And for me, Andy, this sort of focus on design really, this is what it comes down to. Like, Nomos is known for a few things, and design being one of them, and this is where it shines. So you've had the regular production. What do you think about the new ones in relationship to it?
Oh, I mean, the immediate thing that seems to me is the bracelet. I want to see it. I want to try it on. It looks so interesting, but also comfortable.
Yeah.
As you said, there's sort of 2 pieces to it. So I'm really curious to kind of see how it sits and how it feels and how Nomos have tackled it, no doubt, wonderfully. The other thing, Felix, is the dials. You kind of have the black dial that's sort of fairly muted. It doesn't have that bold, luminescent ring that we're used to seeing, supernova ring.
Well, it does, but you don't see it all the time.
Just not bold, right? Like it's kind of blacked out. Yep. And then you've got the white with the orange, and then the navy blue, which is sort of very similar to what I have on my wrist now, but with like really bright yellow. So,
which one's your favorite?
That's tough.
Wasn't for me. Clear answer. Like, I knew within just looking at the 3, I'm like, boom, that one.
My eyes are drawn to the blue and the yellow.
Yeah.
but the black, I think, there's something very special about it. So what's yours?
Blue and yellow. Easy choice for me.
That's just where my eyes go. Like that yellow is just so attention grabbing.
Yeah. And do you know what I think about this? That we're talking about that sort of rally style strap.
Yeah.
Is this as close as we're going to get to like Nomos doing a historical revival watch?
Yeah,
like, is this Nomos on the heritage trend, or is it's sort of like their own version of it? Which I think, again, they've taken those design codes and really sort of done something fresh with it.
I think these are going to sell out really quickly.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's. I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of, I only spent really brief time with this back in the day, but you've been wearing it for a while, and your Instagram really shows. The other thing that I just love about this is that dial is so deep, and that's not something many brands really do. Like, you don't see too many watches that really play with like dial geometry to this degree.
It's honestly, the curve to it is it sweeps. Like it is. I want to see it out of the case to see just how much it sweeps, but it is.
You could bake
it basically comes up to the crystal. So you kind of you have that sort of was it concave that kind of then pops out into the crystal, which is convex. So the flow from the dial to the dome in the crystal is just sort of this like continuous and harmonious kind of discussion that takes place.
Yeah, well, look, Andy, I think that's a wonderful, it's just a wonderful watch, Andy. I was trying to come up with some sort of zazzy way to finish this off, but really, it's just cool. So find out more about these brand new Director's Editions at nomos-glasutte.com. That's nomos-glasuette.com. You can also buy it there, as well as online retailers and local Australian authorised dealers like the Hourglass or Monards.
Alrighty, Felix. Well, let's get back to today's episode. Felix, great to have Nomos back on board. But now it is time to get Gabe from Collective Horology.
Yeah, let's talk about another sporty watch that takes a little bit of a different flavour.
Let's do it.
Andy Green, today's guest is the co-founder of Collective, which is a pretty special watch community that came about in 2019. But they do more than just talk about watches and collect them. They also make them and release them from brands like Zenith, Urwerk, and now IWC, which is something we'll get to in a second. Welcome to OT the Podcast, Gabe Reilly. How are you?
Welcome. Felix, Andy. Guys, thanks for having me. I'm great. Appreciate this.
Yeah. I think it's always a good place to start these discussions right at the beginning. So I'm going to throw you into the deep end, so to speak, with asking, what was your first real watch?
Oh, man. Yeah, good question. So my first real watch, it was like a lightning bolt, came out of nowhere. My girlfriend in high school had this really cool dad. In fact, like, I don't know if this is a tradition in Australia, but in America, when you're graduating from high school in the yearbook, you're left like a quote unquote last will and testament. So it's you're written in the yearbook. You're sort of given something that will complete your life and send you off into the future. And so my girlfriend's last will and testament in our high school yearbook was to be as cool as her dad. And that was no joke. She took that as an offense. She's like, what, you don't think I'm cool? And I was trying to explain to her, no, your dad is just that fucking cool. This is a good thing. This is a compliment. In any event, so her dad was this really cool dude. He was French. He grew up in Morocco and then emigrated to the U.S. I grew up in New York City. And so he was this really cool Moroccan French dude living in New York City. Total free spirit, total character, and he was into watches. And I think it was like toward the time like high school was coming to an end and we're getting ready to graduate. He told me I needed a real watch. I needed a proper watch. And the dude, I don't know if this would still be the way most collectors do it, but he pulled out his Ziploc bag.
Yes.
Full of watches, and gosh, I don't know what was in there, but it was like like the biggest Ziploc bag you can buy at the market. That's what he had, filled with watches. And he pulled out a Cartier Santos tank watch and gave me the watch. And of course, knowing nothing about watches, I of course knew Cartier and understood, it's a major luxury brand, jewelry brand. Didn't realize they made watches, but that was kind of my first real watch, and it was really special to me. Unfortunately, a few years later, it was stolen, and to this day, I still feel like tremendous guilt over that. This guy did this incredibly generous, selfless thing. I can't imagine, and I hope to get to this point. I can't imagine being at a place in my life where I could just pull a watch out of a Ziploc bag, the tank no less, and give it to someone. So to this day, I carry that guilt with me. But it's sort of the spark that lit the fuse.
Yeah, right. So where did you go from there then, and when did it really sort of ignite for you?
Well, I think I had to overcome the guilt. I felt so terrible about this thing. I sort of swore off like proper watches for a while, and then I think a few years later, the thing that reignited it for me was James Bond. Surprise, surprise. I remember seeing, this was in the Pierce Brosnan era. I remember seeing that blue Seamaster with wave dial, and maybe it was just the genius and creative flourish with which the watch was shown in the film. But I remember seeing that watch and just being like, that's kind of cool. Like that, there's something about that watch. Like I really like that watch. So the first thing, of course, I did was go on the internet to try to figure out what the watch was and how much it cost, and it was way beyond my means. And then
Sure.
I started to just research more about James Bond and dive watches, and of course that led me to the Rolex Submariner, again way beyond my means, and sort of led me down this path of first really getting interested in dive watches. And my next proper watch was an SKX 007.
Nice.
And that was a watch that really stuck with me. I still have one in my collection to this day, like an idiot. Of course, I sold it and bought it back, multiple times. But now that they're out of production, you're not prying that thing out of my hands. And that led me down what really fascinates me with watches, which are kind of really purpose-built, well-designed tool watches. That's kind of what I love. I love a lot of things. I try to keep an open mind, but sort of the core of my interest is in tool watches.
Yeah, I think that's a watch journey that sort of, I think, resonates with a lot of people. Maybe not the partner's dad giving you a Cartier. That I sadly missed that step. But certainly James Bond was that Omega, I think, captured a lot of people's attention. One thing that I sort of did a little bit of reading about you, like any good podcast host, and I noticed in a story that you were talking about the Poor Man's Watch Forum.
Oh yeah,
which I think I've got a sort of a working theory that it was one of the more influential websites, because I think was James Stacey from Hodinkee a big fan of it as well.
Oh yeah. In fact, when I met James Stacey, and that was what we talked about, was the bygone era of the Poor Man's Watch Forum.
And that's exactly my question. Like, what made it special, and do you think it could still exist today?
Oh man, what I think made it special is it was the right forum at the right time for me. Like I was saying, I got sticker shock when when I looked up the Omega Seamaster and the Rolex Submariner, and I don't know how I ended up at the Poor Man's Watch Forum. It was probably through researching the SKX 007, or if I'm to be honest, the Invicta, that's sort of a Submariner clone. That was quite a popular watch on that forum. And what it opened my eyes to was, you didn't need to have a large bank account or pocketbook to be interested in this hobby, or more importantly, to find watches that were genuinely well built and interesting in their own way. And so I'm so thankful for it, because a lot of people have kind of the opposite experience when something catches their eye, when they first get that spark or they get interested, and they get sticker shock, and unfortunately they walk away, or they walk into an authorized dealer and they're treated like a commodity, or they feel uncomfortable because everyone's wearing suits and calling you sir or ma'am or whatever. It just feels very informal and stuffy and unapproachable. So I don't know, without the Poor Man's Watch Forum, I might not have gotten into any of this at all. And I think would the Poor Man's Watch Forum be successful today? I think who knows, but one of the publications I love most is Worn and Wound, because they have just they show how much enthusiasm, and not only enthusiasm, how much stuff is possible at the $1,000 and below price point. And there's just such a depth and richness to that world that they bring to life. So in many ways, and they've broadened out their coverage quite a bit, but they're still quite comfortable in their own skin, and they focus on their core. And I'm just thankful that for other people getting into watches now, Worn and Wound is around and can be that entry point.
Yeah, Gresh, it's been nice to see how Worn and Wound have kind of unwavered or haven't wavered in their core since they started. Like, they're still sort of 10 plus years on probably now, and still sort of doing the same thing, and people still respond really well to it. So that's really cool. But yeah, if we think back to those early days of Gabe and Watches, could you have imagined collaborating with Urwerk? When you were first sort of poking around the forums.
Yeah, Urwerk wasn't even like a twinkle in my eyes. I probably wouldn't have even thought of it even just a couple of years ago. I got to a point in my collecting where I started to feel, and this is okay, there's nothing wrong with this. There's so many different ways to experience this hobby, but I got to a point where I felt like, oh, what I like is this. I like these really well designed, industrial, indestructible, rugged tool watches. That's what I'm into. And I think what I actually would credit Collective with is expanding my taste. And what's ironic to me about that is Collective started as about 50 members, and now there's just over 80. So it's a small group of people. It's a tiny group of people, often a strange corner of the internet, talking about watches. And in the last few years in that group, I've been exposed to way more kind of diversity in terms of brands, complications, approaches to watchmaking than I ever had been before, with all of the internet, all of Instagram, all of YouTube, all of it, podcasts, all of that available to me, which is interesting. And it really sort of broadened me. And I think I would have said a few years ago, I don't know, I'm not so sure about Urwerk. I don't know what I would do there. And huge credit to Asher, but more importantly, the other folks in Collective for really turning me on to independent watchmaking and different approaches to watchmaking. So on that level, no, I would never have imagined it. And on another level, man, when we started working with Martin Fry and Felix Baumgartner, I was pinching myself. I couldn't believe these guys are taking a flyer from us, and they want to work with us. It was totally surreal.
Yeah, I think that's really, that is an interesting way of doing it. I think a lot of people sort of go into if you've been learning about something for a while, you come from the baseline position that you have a fixed opinion, everything you need to know, and you're happy where you are. And that, what you've sort of just said there is, this relationship with Collective has opened your your preferences, or changed your mind, or allowed you to explore whole new areas of a hobby that you might have not considered before. I don't want to get too much into sort of the details of what Collective is and how it works, because we covered that with Asher, and we'll definitely link that up in the show notes. But what does a good online community look like to you? How does that, debate really sort of fly in a healthy way?
Yeah, it's a good question. Oftentimes the question we get asked, the comparison we're asked to make is like, what's the difference between Collective and say Red Bar? And whether it's a community that's run sort of in a private way, like Collective is, and it's kind of more intimate in its scope, or if it's something like Red Bar, which is come one, come all, I think both are trying to do the same thing, which is bring humanity back to this hobby. With Red Bar, the idea is we show up, you bring your watches, we hang out, we talk, everyone has a good time, we're respectful of one another, we're open-minded, we check out a lot of watches and talk about stuff, and that's the approach there. And with Collective, it's an online community, but we also get together in person and we have events and we see each other in the real world, which is shocking, especially these days. But it's just a different approach to the same thing. The goal is to have a humane discourse and to have a cordial discourse. And I think what's missing in so much of the online community, look, we're all lucky. I'm super fortunate. I'm sure you guys feel this way as well. Like we're also fortunate that the tent has gotten bigger and that more and more people continue to get interested in watches in whatever way that they are and make sense for them. But with that, sometimes the conversation about the stuff online is less than civil. And so our approach to that is like intimacy. Like we're creating a community where everyone gets to know each other. And the primary way we do that is we run the online community in a Facebook group. And the reason we do that, I know you guys use Discord, but the reason we chose to use Facebook, there's so many things we thought about doing. We considered like Slack or WhatsApp or whatever. The reason we picked Facebook is because everyone on there is their authentic self. Everyone shows up in the group with their first name, their last name, and a picture of themselves. And so there's no hiding behind a screen name. There's a sense of when you're communicating with other people in this group, like you're communicating with other people and you have a sense of who they are just beyond the group. You can become friends with them on Facebook and see into their lives and support them through whatever's going on in their lives outside of the group. And so that was a big choice we make. We debate all the time. Should we be on Facebook? Should we be on another platform or try something else? But that's working for us. And it's helping with this notion of like bringing some humanity back to this hobby.
Very cool, very cool. So, look, one of the big reasons we've got you on today is to talk about a watch, the C.03, which is I think your third collaboration. It coincides with you guys having a presence in London, which is a relatively new announcement as well. What does that mean in a real world sense? Because you just sort of said that the Collective is a Facebook group.
Yeah. So, the origin of Collective, at least geographically, like where we started Collective was in Silicon Valley. I live and Asher now lives. We both live down in Southern California, but we lived and worked in Silicon Valley for a long time. And that's geographically where we started. And most of our members at the beginning were from Silicon Valley. Today, most members are from California. But outside of California, the next largest cohort of members is from the UK. And so when we were thinking about the right way to expand Collective so that we can both grow the community, but again, like keep the humanity of the group in place, keep the sense of intimacy in place, we started to debate how we wanted to do that and what would make sense. And I think what we ended up deciding was we would create these sort of hubs. They wouldn't be different chapters. And I think, like we can split hairs on words, but we chose like hubs versus chapters in the sense that like anyone who joins the London hub and joins Collective based out of the UK or Europe is part of Collective. They're not part of Collective UK. They're part of they're part of that group. Where the hub comes into play is how we program things in the real world. So what it would actually look like in terms of the real world is that not all of our events would be in the US time zones, or not all of our events would be physically in places like California or New York. We'll have more programming, more events, and more opportunity for people to connect in real life in the UK. So we have a member in the UK who's our chapter lead. Asher and I certainly love London, and we're thrilled to open this next chapter. But we don't know the watch community there. We might think we do, but we don't know the watch community there. So we have a member of Collective who's now stepping up to be the chapter lead, and he'll run the UK chapter, or that hub, and we'll do programming there, starting with our first event for that market, which is going to be a launch event we do with IWC at their boutique on Bond Street in October.
Well, that seems like the perfect segue to find out about what this event in Bond Street in October is launching. Can you tell us about your brand new IWC?
Yeah. Okay. So when we do these collaborations, I think when we started Collective, Asher and I put together this dream list of the brands we were going to collaborate with, and you can probably imagine who's on there.
Rolex.
And yeah, sure. And I think in the few years, this will be our 5th collaboration. So we've at this point we've got the scars and the wounds to prove it. We've learned a few things, and I think what we've learned is, the name on the dial is not as important as the people at the brand and the culture of the brand or the watchmaker. They need to be open to working in creative concepts. They have to be open for risk. And they have to be open to true collaboration. And for some watchmakers, that doesn't work. That doesn't make sense. And that's cool. That's part of who they are, and that's their thing. And, you can't like everything about everyone. If you stand for everything, you stand for nothing. Now, IWC, however, is a brand that we both love and are huge fans of. So Asher and I are huge fans of IWC. This is the next brand we're collaborating with. And wouldn't you know, they happen to be incredible collaborators. And so this partnership actually started back in January of 2020, when I had the opportunity to visit the IWC headquarters and museum in Schaffhausen.
That was a well-timed trip.
Yeah, I know. Got in the nick of time. Might have even been February. And when I was on that trip, I had the chance to meet with some folks at IWC, and I was actually wearing our first watch, which was a Zenith. I didn't own an IWC at that time. I was wearing our first watch, and someone there asked me what's that watch you're wearing? And boy, was that a conversation starter. And so one thing led to another, and I told them about Collective, and said they would be interested in doing a collaboration. And I'm pinching myself. I can't believe this. Did this happen? I'm having this out of body experience. And to be totally honest, we went into it with a little bit of skepticism, not because we don't love IWC, but because they're a big brand, and a small group of collectors is not even a rounding error for them. And we just didn't. And it's also one of the things about IWC that's so great. It's a brand that's really comfortable in their own skin. They have a very clear approach to watchmaking and watch design. They do a ton of innovation within that, and a ton of interesting things within that. But they really know themselves. So one of our questions is gosh, are these guys going to take risks creatively? So we went down the road with them, and I think there were 2 things we learned. One was IWC is incredibly collaborative. We were able to work directly with Christian Knoop, who's the the creative director at IWC on the design of the watch. We figured we might meet with him, and then he was going to pawn us off to someone else. No, he has been involved in the process throughout personally, and has been an incredible partner, and by the way, very patient. I think there were probably a few times where he wanted to wring our necks with the number of kind of requests and questions and feedback and rounds we went on things.
He was 6 emails ahead of you.
Oh my gosh, the poor guy. My heart goes out to him. But the other thing we learned about IWC is, going back to them being really comfortable in their own skin, is less is more. So one of the things we looked at a lot with the design of this watch was like, how do we add more? What are we missing? Are we doing enough? We've prided ourselves on other watches for really going above and beyond doing like a redial or things like that, and working with watchmakers on new materials or watchmaking techniques or complications. And we kept on asking ourselves, is what we're doing good enough? Should we be adding more? Should the pushers be in Ceratanium or whatever? And I think where we ended up with IWC is, less is more. And in this case, in the design exploration, the back end of the pencil, the eraser, what we removed, is more important than the tip of the pencil. We're adding anything. And so what we ended up with is a 41 millimeter pilot's chronograph. It's got a sort of charcoal matte dial with light gray numerals and markers that glow white. So I believe it's the first time IWC has used white glowing luminous material on their dials, which is just cool. And then it has a bunch of other flourishes that are don't call attention to themselves. So it very much looks and feels like, oh, this is an IWC. It's IWC doing IWC. But if you dig deeper, there's a bunch of these little details, not just the white glowing luminous material, but for instance, the day wheel on the watch. Not only is it matched to the dial, but it's a German day wheel, which is a nice little nod to one of the things that makes IWC different and stand out, which is their Swiss-German heritage. And then on the back of the watch, you've got a black-plated rotor and display case back. And really the only color on this watch, and this was intentional, are the jewels in the movement. And really the only flourish in this watch is the case back and the decoration of the movement. Everything else is very, very stark and simple, and really plays at home with what IWC does best versus trying to add and add and add.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting insight into designing a watch and just how tricky it is. And I noticed that there's no real collective branding anywhere. There's a little engraving on the back of the case, C03, but there's nothing that says no logo, no branding. What was that, a deliberate decision?
Yeah, none of our watches have ever said collective on them. I believe for the second collaboration we did, which was with Josh Shapiro, you guys have talked about that. One of the options you could customize was adding a plate to the bottom of the dial that said collective on it. People, either did that or did something else or had no plates on the dial whatsoever. But in general, no, we never add collective, the name collective to the watch. Now, Asher is famous for saying, we've never put Collective's name on a watch, nor will we ever.
Nice.
And, look, generally I stand by that. We have no plans to put our name on a dial or a case back or anything like that. Nothing is planned, but I don't know. Never say never.
Never say never. Why is it called a love letter to IWC? What's going on there?
Yeah. This goes back to my professed love of tool watches. And what, the watch in my collection, actually, that really inspired the design here is the IWC IW3706.
Nice.
This was the first pilot's chronograph that IWC did. Its more famous sibling is the ceramic model, which I think is the 3709. But the 3706 was the stainless steel pilot's chronograph that IWC produced from the mid 90s through the early 2000s. And what I love about that watch is it's super clean, super stark, incredibly robust. and well made. And I love that era of IWC in particular. I know a lot of people do. A lot of people love the advertising from that era. Because IWC just had a very unapologetic attitude. And some ways that's controversial. Some of the ads sort of maybe rubber stamped masculinity a bit too much. But there was a spirit there, and this sort of no nonsense approach to what they did. And our goal with this watch was almost to take what we love about IWC and distill it in a timepiece. And the way I like to talk about it is, my goal here was to create the watch that, if we had gotten in a time machine, traveled back to the mid '90s, and kidnapped the design team from IWC and brought them to modern day, this is the watch they would make. It's still quintessentially IWC. It has a very rugged, stark design to it, but it also reflects the latest in IWC's capabilities around industrialized movement production, which was not something that they were doing on the same scale back then.
That's a maybe a more graphic and violent expression of design inspiration than I was expecting. the time travel and kidnapping of Swiss executives.
Maybe we didn't kid. We lured them with chocolates and baubles into our time machine.
I think that anyone working at IWC in the 90s would probably jump at the chance for a bit of time travel. They seem like that kind of crew. What makes so you've talked about the advertising and you've talked about the company, like that sort of, there was something in the water in Schaffhausen in the 90s, but what is it about the watches from that time that sort of drew you in the first place, or continues to obviously inspire you today?
Yeah. The number one thing is, and this is true of watchmaking, or a nice pint of beer, or anything really for me. Like, I just love something that has a point of view, and particularly in that era, and particularly around the pilots' watches, but even other stuff they were doing in that era. Like, I love the aqua timers of that era. IWC just had a very no nonsense point of view. They were not trying to be a brand for everyone. In fact, again, this is controversial, and maybe they excluded people or made people feel excluded, but they were very clear about who they were. They designed tool watches for men, and they had a really clear point of view and design language around that was no fuss. And I think that's what I love. And what's amazing about IWC today is they've continued to really broaden out in terms of broadening their product catalog, broadening the watches that they make, broadening the technologies and the capabilities they're doing. But whether you're looking at a Da Vinci or a Portuguese or a pilot's watch, there really is like a consistency of approach in everything they do, which is very, very clean, very no muss, no fuss. And I love that they stand they stand not in opposition to, but they stand apart from the rest of the Swiss watch industry. They're not from the French-speaking parts of Switzerland. They're Swiss German. They're quite different. Of course, they're still Swiss, but those are two distinct parts of the country with their own identities and culture and language. And IWC is very Swiss German in that way. One of the things with watchmaking that we popular imagination, right, fetishize a little bit, is the romantic notion of, like, the Swiss watchmaker in his workshop somewhere in the mountains, hand finishing every component of a movement. And there's a place for that, and that is very romantic. And seeing the hand of the maker in your watch and all that is amazing. But IWC has a very different philosophy, which is, they were the company was founded by an American who traveled to Switzerland to look for the best ways to industrialize watchmaking, to move away from pure reliance on hand finishing and assembly and all that kind of stuff. And IWC is very proud of the fact that they make an incredibly nice watch, largely through industrialized process. And when you think about it, that's a very different philosophy from the rest of Swiss watchmaking. So again, they just have a very distinct point of view, and they kind of march to the beat of their own drummer, which I think is commendable in the Swiss watch industry, where there's a lot of copycats.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and they certainly do have a distinct identity in the watch landscape. Now, I know we've sort of got to talk about some other stuff, but I want one last question about the design process. Did you try and convince them at any point to let you use the 90s IWC logo?
Oh, no, that like the script logo?
Yeah.
International Watch Company. No, but that again, this is more of the appeal of IWC. I mean, they're called the International Watch Company. How more no muss, no fuss do you get? One thing that we did try to get them to do, and they told us they would look into it. Apparently, it had to go to Chris Granger. Was we asked if we could do a sterile dial.
Oh.
In other words, we asked if we could remove the IWC Schaffhausen word mark, and they were open to it. Again, like this goes back to the idea of like they were willing to work on a concept, and like it made sense given the design of the watch. What we were trying to do was design a dial that was so kind of minimal, monochromatic, and stark that it invited you to turn over the watch to look at the case back and make the movement sort of the hero of the watch, and really draw attention to what's on the back of the watch and the decoration of the movement. And so they took that to Chris, and I believe he shot it down. And look, it makes sense. Their brand is important to them, and particularly when you think about the pilot's watch categories, there are a lot of brands in that space that either copy IWC or, frankly, have a similar kind of aesthetic and design language. And so the watch being made by IWC and being unmistakable in that way is an important part of what makes it special. So we did not fall on our sword over that one.
Makes for a cool story. All right, so tell us about the nuts and bolts. What's the price? What's the size? What's the movement?
Yeah, so the price, I have it in US dollars.
That's fine.
It's your listeners are probably used to, but also sick of. At least your listeners in Australia are used to and sick of doing the currency conversions. But it's $7,150 US dollars.
Okay.
It's, I believe, just under 7 in pounds, in British pounds.
Sure.
Okay.
Specs of the watch. So it's built on the same platform as the 41 millimeter Pilot's chronograph. So if you guys have seen and gone hands-on with the new watches that were released this year during Watches and Wonders, there's I believe a blue and a green dialed version. So this is that same platform, and what differentiates it is you have this charcoal matte dial instead of a blue or green dial. Those dials are beautiful, but this is different sort of take, a little more toolish. And then the other thing that really differentiates it, of course, is the color, glowing color of the lume, the decoration in terms of the black rotor on the case back and the German day wheel. So it's sort of, in some ways, just a stripped down, or more from my perspective, a more kind of pure IWC take on that same platform.
Yeah, right. And how many are you making? How do we get our hands on all that sort of stuff?
Okay, so we're making 125
nice.
of these watches, and a big part of the reason we're going from, I believe our last collective series release with Moser was 50. We're going up to 125 on this. Is
different price point.
It's a different price point, and we want to open a new chapter. So first and foremost, we want to make sure every collective member who decides they might want this watch has first right of refusal and has the ability to get it. So we always make sure we make enough for every member. So we cover them, and then we think beyond that, how many would we want to sell so we could open in a meaningful way a hub in London, as well as grow membership in other parts of the world where people are interested. So if they are interested in joining, whether you're in the UK, Europe, the United States, or anywhere in the world, we have members in Australia. You go to our website, collectivehorology.com. On the website, you can learn all about the watch. And then if you're interested in joining Collective, you can apply on the website. I think Asher talked about this. Like we know the idea of asking people to fill out a quote unquote application for the right to purchase a watch can sound a bit elitist. That's not our intention at all. For better or worse, it's the only way we know how to consider new members at scale. So when someone does apply, you answer 4 questions. They're short and painless questions. I promise you, we won't ask you any questions about what watches you own. We don't care. We just want to know you're passionate about the hobby. Every day, while the watch is still available and on sale, our membership committee, which is comprised of me and Asher and then 3 other members, will review all the applications that come in on a given day. And we'll then send a notice to the folks who we admit. We tend to, again, we don't want to be elitist. We don't want to exclude people. We're more looking for red flags than we are for the people to astound us with their horological chops. So we'll send out an email saying, hey, thanks for the application. If you'd like to join Collective, you can purchase the watch, and we make all those details painless. The watch is fulfilled directly through IWC. So you purchase the watch, you purchase through IWC, and it will ship within a few months of the pre-order.
Yeah, right. That seems like a pretty foolproof process and a good way. And hopefully anyone that gets their hands on one becomes a group of a great bunch of watch fans. Full disclosure, we're recording this a little bit before the release of the watch itself, but we have seen some very early hints as to what might be coming. We've seen some Instagram stories of you guys hanging out with 2 of the internet's finest people, Jeremy Kirkland and Stephen Pulverant. What's going on there? What can you tell us?
Yeah, there's a third who I guess you didn't see.
Didn't make it onto camera.
It was Adrian, right?
Maybe it was Adrian. I can't say.
Maybe.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. So we talk about this watch, and Felix, you mentioned this as our love letter to IWC, and a place and a watch that comes, and a collaboration that comes from a place of fandom, being fans of IWC and seeking to make a watch that would resonate with people who are passionate about the brand in the same way. And so what we're doing for this launch is, although Asher and I appear on the occasional podcast and things like that, we never appear in any of the marketing for any of our watches. Our names aren't on the website or anything like that. And so when we thought about how do we tell this story of a watch that was developed and conceived from a place of collector and community enthusiasm, we're like, well, who can we find to help us tell this story? Who can we find to help us tell the story of what makes IWC special from a collectors and enthusiasm standpoint? Who has an interesting personal connection to IWC, and who has an interesting take on this stuff? And so Stephen Pulverant, Jeremy Kirkland of the Blammo podcast, and Adrian Barker of Bark and Jack came to mind to us because we know they're IWC fans, and we know that each of them has a unique take on the category. Stephen, of course, has a really product and industry driven take on it. Jeremy has a take as really just a pure fan of IWC and the brand, but also how IWC fits in with style. And then Adrian has a really fascinating take on the kind of the collector's point of view. Where does IWC fit in if you're a watch collector and enthusiast? How does it fit into your collecting journey, and what is there to appreciate about it? So we asked those 3 guys to sort of be the voice be the voice of the collaboration. So I think what you guys saw was a video we were shooting with the three of them and some other content that we're developing for the launch for our website and for Instagram and things like that.
Yeah, nice. Can't wait to, well, I guess by the time you're listening to this, we'll have seen it already, but, future Felix can't wait.
Future Felix can't wait. My favorite, and I don't know if this will make the director's cut, my favorite moment or my favorite nugget that we heard from these guys, and it was from Adrian talking about the design of this watch and the collaboration as something that he viewed as like really a distillation of the things that he thinks makes IWC distinct. And so his quote was, "With this watch, it's almost as if IWC have IWC'd themselves." And I was just like, "Oh my gosh, you found the words that have been eluding me." So it's just like really interesting to hear other people's take on the stuff you make. I'm sure for you guys with the podcast, you get feedback all the time that surprises you or crystallizes something that you felt that you couldn't quite put into words. And so it's always interesting to get an outside take on this stuff.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we're very excited. I can't wait for people to see this watch. I'm sort of tempted, and I don't know. Now I'm thinking, is this my entry into the world of collective horology? I don't know. It's just under 10,000 Aussie dollars. So it seems like a pretty tempting and attractive timepiece. What I want to ask you is, we're sort of leaving our winter. You guys have just left your summer. You mentioned offline that you live in a sunny part of California called Ojai, which I love. I love the name, but curious to hear what your opinion is on the perfect Ojai / summer watch.
Oh man, yeah, okay, great question.
Just to change gears on you real quick there.
Fortunately, I've got an answer handy, guys, because this was a dilemma I faced this summer, which was I have all these watches and not that many, but I have a bunch of watches, and I'm really not so confident on like the waterproofness of these watches, and I realized like what I needed was a modern, robust, waterproof watch that I could sort of take anywhere with me, jump into any swimming pool with, take to the ocean with me, go wherever. And it struck me the watch I needed, the perfect Ojai summer watch, is the Omega Seamaster Diver 300 with the white dial, which I love. So this goes full circle. We started talking about the Seamaster and James Bond and all that stuff, and I think at its price point, you can't find a better dive watch, and one that's really as interesting, from just a watchmaking standpoint in terms of the coaxial escapement and the movement technology and what's on display there. But the kicker for me is that they brought back the wave dial. That was one of the details that attracted me to the Seamaster in the first place. Like I remember that blue Seamaster that Pierce Brosnan wore, and just seeing the detail of the wave dial, I thought that was the coolest thing. And it gutted me on the previous generation when they took that away. I think they had a beautiful lacquer dial in its place, but the fact that Omega have brought back the wave dial, but also done it in a way that's innovative, using ceramic and I guess etching the ceramic is the kicker. So yeah, the white Seamaster is the way to go. It's the ultimate summer watch. So
on rubber,
as you guys gear up for summer, give it a thought. Yeah, on rubber.
Naturally, nothing says I'm not working more than a rubber strap. Now, one other thing I was very interested to get an update on. Really, it's a little highlight on your Instagram that hasn't gotten the love it deserves, I suspect. What's going on with the Patina project?
Okay. Yeah, this goes back to life in Ojai. So on my Instagram, which is 4-digit Charmer, my personal Instagram, I underwent during lockdown a patina project. So I have a I've got a GMT master, an old Coke GMT master from the early 2000s. The reference number escapes me. Guys, don't come after me.
Yeah.
And from the Rolex forums, I sourced a genuine replacement bezel, and this genuine factory part became the object of this test. So, Ojai, as I was telling you guys earlier, is basically the high desert. It gets very, very hot here, incredibly hot here. And the power of the sun is intense. Anything you leave outside will immediately fade. So I figured, let's see what the unrelenting summer sun in Ojai can do to a Coke bezel, the aluminum bezel. And I put it up on the roof. It was up there all summer for about 3 months. And you know what? Credit to Rolex. For whatever reason, that thing didn't shade or fade one bit. So the patina project was abandoned. I ended up just bleaching it, and man, it looks great. So if you're ever trying to naturally age your own Rolex, replacement bezel, just skip the line and go straight to bleach.
Throw it out in the sun and splash some bleach over it.
Yeah, there you go.
You got to do the hard way.
A really tough question. So you've got you and Ash are sort of a bit of this iconic duo. Felix and I are also an iconic duo. I want to know who's the Felix and who's the Andy in the collective relationship.
Gosh, well, I don't want to presume that I know you guys so well. So I could.
Well, you've been listening since day one, you said, so
That's true.
Your 5 favorite episodes.
Well, the episode that tuned me in was, I think, when you guys had James Stacy on very early, nice. and then he cross promoted you guys. This is how the podcast thing works, right? On the Gray NATO, and I was like, man, I gotta give this a listen. And by the way, shout out to James Stacy, who is doing an amazing job with Hodinky Radio,
just with everything he does.
Well, with everything he does, but that's it. I've been a Gray NATO listener also from the very beginning, and I was a little skeptical. I was like, can I really listen to James Stacy twice a week? Is it really going to be that different? And bless his heart, the way he approaches Gray NATO and Hodinky Radio, totally different. And the vibe he brings to Hodinky Radio, very different from what Steven did, and there's no replacing that. But it's a really fresh format. So hats off to James Stacy for turning me on to you guys as a longtime listener. Now, the differences, I'll tell you what the differences between me and Asher are, and maybe you can tell me who's the Andy and who's the Felix. So Asher's his job title at Collective is managing director. My job title is creative director. The lines really blur between what we do, but Asher is more of kind of like the fast talker relationship guy. And he's really great at outreach to people in the watch community. He's really great at the business development side of things. He's also someone who just worries a lot. He's extremely neurotic and overthinks things. Now that's not a liability. That's an asset, because on the other hand, what I tend to focus on are more the creative aspects of the business. So everything from the concepts around the watches we make to the design of our website to things like with Urwerk, we worked on them with packaging and manuals, and we designed all sorts of things around that launch. And so my focus tends to be more on that kind of stuff, but it's creative partnership between the both of us and the brands we work with. But I tend not to overthink things. And so having someone who does overthink things and someone who doesn't overthink things, we end up finding a healthy balance in the middle. And I think that really helps one another. We are the yin to each other's yang, as we've been since we met in the 7th grade.
Good answer.
What do you reckon,
So
Andy?
who's the Andy and who's the Felix? Yeah.
I think I might be the Asher.
It depends. Yeah, that's what I initially thought, but also, it's not all. It's not so clear cut. It's not like a 1-to-1 analog, but maybe if what is it, the Myers Briggs? It's oh god, sorry guys.
Is that you, Felix?
Yeah, hang on.
Beautiful.
Just relaxing. What's this alarm for?
I don't know, mate. I didn't know I had that one.
What a soothing alarm.
No wonder you're always late for things. Why would you ever get out of bed to that?
Exactly.
As I was saying, like, I don't think it's a one-to-one analog with the relationship. Maybe it's sort of like that Myers-Briggs thing, that like cult of personality. Like
it's a Venn diagram.
I'm an Asher.
You're an eighth Asher.
Asher leaning into Gabe with a hint of, I don't know. I want some James Stacey in there as well. That's the real question.
You're a green, orange, blue, yellow, I think.
Whatever it is. Who's the one that's stressing the other person about deadlines?
Oh, Asher. I mean, look, I would be nowhere without that guy. And in some ways it's a bad thing, because I don't know what the dynamic is with you guys, but it's like I can offload all of the worrying about timelines and what needs to happen onto him, which really improves my quality of life.
Maybe I don't want to be the Gabe anymore, Andy, but I think I am.
Yeah, I think it just became very clear cut who's the Gabe.
Oh,
sorry, Andy.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Look,
cool.
Gabe, as a listener from day 5, whenever we had that Grey NATO episode, are intimately aware, we like to end an episode with some sneaky non-watch recommendations. So hit us with yours.
Cool. My sneaky non-watch recommendation is, it's sort of twofold. So first is this summer I got to reading, winter for you guys, this summer for me. I finally read this book called The Power Broker, which is, hundreds and hundreds of pages. It's the story of Robert Moses, who is probably the most consequential figure in the history of the city of New York, although he never held political office. He was basically responsible for all sorts of public works, from bridges to parks to stadiums to you name it, housing developments in New York City and New York State. And it's a fascinating book. I have no idea why someone hasn't yet created an HBO series about it. But this guy was in power from the 1920s through the 60s, and the mayors of New York effectively ate out of his hands because he was responsible for these government agencies that collected all of the tolls. So he had giant purses. He had millions and millions of dollars to do things with and build stuff with. And so he had, he was the consummate power broker. That's why the book is called The Power Broker. The reason it's a recommendation inside of a recommendation is like I said, if anyone has the time to read this book or listen to it as an audiobook, you won't be disappointed, and you'll also be wondering, how is this not a mini series? But I came to it through my library, and I think that's really my recommendation, which is check out your local library. I've saved so much money not buying books and not buying audiobooks and checking them out for free. But also the fact that you have to kind of wait sometimes for books that might be new and popular forces you to get into the back catalog a little bit, which is how I came across The Power Broker. It's just a book I'd been putting off reading for a long time. And I only read it because the other books I wanted to read more urgently just weren't available. And so I read that instead. But man, the library will open new worlds. It will provide plenty of cultural recommendations, and it's free. So your local library, hit it up.
I love it. Gabe, thank you so much for joining Felix tonight. We'll be sure to link everything up, and definitely won't release this episode early, so that IWC is going to be out about just under 10K Aussie. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Thank you for those recommendations. It's been an honor.
Yeah, absolute treat. Thank you for your time.
Guys, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Okay, Andy, that is all we have for this week. Thank you very much, first of all, Gabe, Collective, and, affiliated organizations there. IWC, thank you for making a great watch. Thank you as well to Nomos for sponsoring the episode. Always great to work with you guys. And if anyone out there wants to get in touch with us, Andy, how do they email us?
otthepodcast@gmail.com, or if you'd like to support us on Instagram, ot.podcast, Felix. And of course, we should mention, join our Discord. It's a heap of fun and growing by the day. So that is linked up in the show notes.
We're getting some wild plane content in there recently.
Yeah, there's a channel for planes and classic cinema. Felix has gone rogue.
A bit of crossover there. I'm sorry, guys. Anyway, all that sort of stuff is great, but I think it's even better when you tell other people about it.
Yes. So make sure you spread the word around, as always. If you like OT, 5-star review, tell your friends, subscribe, tell your neighbours, scream it from the rooftops.
Yeah, my mum's a fan.
Yes, so is mine.
She liked the chat we had with Adrian.
Oh,
yeah,
very good.